let's dive right in. We're about to unpack a story that sits right at the intersection of a prime minister's personal finances and national policy. We'll be looking at the documented connections that have really sparked a major political controversy.
So this is the big question at the heart of it all. What we're really exploring here are the documented links between Prime Minister Mark Carney's personal wealth, which is tied to his old employer, Brookfield Asset Management, and the direction that Canadian government policy has been taking.
And look, this isn't just speculation or some kind of theory. Canada's own ethics commissioner confirmed this direct financial link under oath in front of a parliamentary committee. That testimony is pretty much the official starting point for this entire controversy.
To really get what's going on here, we need to understand two key things. First, the actual money involved for the Prime Minister. And second, the specific Canadian laws that are supposed to govern this exact type of situation.
So let's talk numbers. At the center of all this is $6.8 million US. That's how much the Prime Minister's Brookfield stock options were worth when he got into politics. Now, instead of selling them, which is the standard move to avoid these kinds of problems, he put them in a blind trust. But, the issue remains. His personal bottom line is directly connected to how well Brookfield does.
And here's where the law gets really interesting. Under Canadian law, it's all about perception. It's not about having to prove some kind of backroom deal or a crime. The law says that if a reasonable observer could think there's a conflict, that's enough. That alone means action has to be taken. It's all about maintaining the appearance of integrity.
So, to deal with this apparent conflict, an official ethics screen was set up. The whole idea was to build a wall between the Prime Minister and any decisions that could help Brookfield. But the big question being raised in the source material is, well, did it actually work?
And wow, this slide really paints a picture of the problem critics are pointing to. The screen reportedly only covers about 103 of Brookfield's 2,000 or so corporate entities. I mean, do the math. That leaves a staggering 95% of the company's business completely outside the scope of this ethics screen.
And get this, even with that screen in place, the Prime Minister had 3 documented meetings with Brookfield executives after he was sworn in. And according to the records, one of those meetings happened right inside the Prime Minister's office itself.
Okay, so now let's switch gears and look at domestic policy, because this is where we start to see what's being described as a pattern, a potential alignment between major government funding announcements and Brookfield's specific investments.
First up, housing. Here's the connection that's being made. While Carney was a VP at Brookfield, the company bought Modular, a global giant in modular housing, for $5 billion. Fast forward a bit, and as Prime Minister, his government announces a $26 billion modular housing program, the exact industry where Brookfield had just become a huge player. And you see a very similar story playing out in the energy sector. The government announces a $2 billion investment in small modular reactors. This is a direct boost to the nuclear giant Westinghouse, a company whose acquisition for Brookfield was personally completed by Mark Carney. And it doesn't stop there. Take a look at tech. The government has committed huge amounts of money to AI and digital infrastructure. Well, that public funding directly benefits the data centers that support all that. And Brookfield happens to own industry giants like Compass Data Centers and Data4.
All right, let's widen the lens and look at the global stage. Because according to the source material, there's been a pretty sudden and dramatic shift in Canada's trade policy that also seems to mirror Brookfield's global investment strategy, almost perfectly.
So check out this timeline. It really tells a story. During the 2025 election, the big promise was all about getting a better trade deal with the U.S., but by October, those talks had stalled. Then, after winning a narrow majority in April 2026, the government announces a massive strategic pivot away from the American market just days later. So if not the U.S., then where? The new game plan laid out in this forward guidance policy was all about emerging markets. We're talking specifically about countries in Asia and the Middle East, like India, Indonesia, and the UAE. And here's the kicker. These newly prioritized countries, they just happen to be the exact same markets where Brookfield has been pouring billions and billions of dollars into things like infrastructure, renewable energy, and technology. The core of its global growth strategy.
Let's use the government's trip to India as a case study of how this all apparently connects. Step 1. Brookfield partners up with the Indian conglomerate Reliance. Step 2. Prime Minister Carney meets with the head of that exact same partner, Mukesh Ambani. Step 3. Just days after that meeting, Canada signs a huge national energy deal with India. And Step 4. That deal boosts LNG exports, which, according to the sources, flow right through pipelines owned by, you guessed it, Brookfield.
So when you put all of these different pieces together, what are you left with? Well, the source material boils the whole case down to 5 core problems.
Let's just run through them quickly. First, the financial link isn't a secret. The ethics commissioner confirmed it. Second, that ethics screen is described as basically useless, covering only 5% of Brookfield while meetings happened anyway. Third, the people managing that screen can be fired by the Prime Minister. Fourth, the alignment between government policy and Brookfield's investments is presented not as a few coincidences, but as a clear pattern. And fifth, a lack of transparency is cited regarding meetings requested by Parliament.
And all of this evidence, pulled from public records and sworn testimony, it all leads back to one huge central question. And it's a question that, under Canadian law, every single citizen is empowered to ask. Are these government decisions being made in the public interest or for private profit?